And we're back at Halloween-a-Palooza 2024 with a new guest. Why don't you tell us your name, where you're from, and the name of your movie?
Mike Torson. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and I was part of Chicken Wing Apocalypse as the person who wrote/dreamt it.
Wrote/dreamt it, I like.
Yeah, I love this animation on this.
Well, one of my questions was going to be, how'd you come up with the idea of the film? It sounds like a dream. What was that like?
And this was almost 10 years ago at this point. It was essentially, I had just, I don't know, it was almost like a fever dream in a way. It was one of those vivid dreams that you're having that you wake up and, you don't even know if it's real or not. And I have a friend who is also in filmmaking, and he, him and I have done a couple projects together in the past, and I emailed him that dream, and I said, you were in it, another friend of ours was in it, and here it was, the world is ending, the sun is crashing into the earth, earth is crashing into the sun, I should say, and, we're all going to die, and we just decided to go shoot guns and eat chicken wings. And, the email was pretty much exactly word for word for what's on screen at this point. He took a couple liberties. He changed the name of one of the friends that was in it to another person who ended up being the narrator because he kind of wanted to give him a part. But other than that, it's really exactly how it was dreamt or written.
That's awesome. So what made you want to pursue film?
Well, for me, it's always kind of been more of a side project sort of thing. I did major in broadcasting, so I've always enjoyed, being involved in different things like that. When we were in college, I would kind of help out a little bit here and there with a public access program that was produced in Omaha, do a little bit of acting in that. And, after being in broadcasting, I actually worked in the arena setting, doing like game day production, things like that for a number of years, and got out of it, just ended up with a 9-to-5 insurance job. So there's still that creative itch in a lot of ways. And, I'm not as much the editor or anything like that. He's the one who can kind of put those things together, but he's, sometimes like, if you ever have an idea, let me know, because a couple of the ones that, I've had or brought to him have worked out really well.
Yeah, and he's able to just bounce off your ideas very well kind of thing.
And we've had a great friendship since the 8th grade, went through high school together, both majored, had the same major in college, made it all the way through that. He's probably the only reason I even graduated college, because there were a couple times I was getting a little too wild for my own good, and he'd make sure I show up to class and do all that type of stuff. So, good friendship.
So what was the pre-production process like?
Well, as I mentioned, it was really about a 10-year sort of thing, and it was kind of something that we both just sat on. And I remember him saying, someday we're going to make a short out of this. And like, okay, whatever, when do you have time? There's other projects that end up happening in the meantime. And then, kind of out of the blue, he just said, over the last year, he's like, I think it's time. He's like, one of our friends who lives down in Austin, Texas, she's an artist down there. And so without her, I don't know that it would have necessarily been possible. Amber is her name. She's in the credits, Amber Bambler. Oh. And she drew everything. And then Mike took that artwork and kind of, added computer, graphics and things like that along to it. So that made it easy and feasible to do it. And then that kind of became the finished product.
So you were mainly more in the writing aspect of it and the coming up with the idea, but how involved were you able to be when it was in the animation process like that?
He was bouncing ideas off me just very, a little bit, saying like, hey, this is your story. I don't necessarily want to do anything to ruin your idea of it. But for the most part, he's more of an artist. Yeah. He's, into music. He's into, the computer animation stuff. He's not, somebody that draws. So you kind of needed, all three of them. But I would say, it's really more his baby in that regard. He had the vision of how he wanted it to look. And I wouldn't have wanted to change that. I wanted to see what he came up with what I came up with to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long did you think it took him?
It was pretty close to 6 months to a year off and on. I don't remember exactly because, when you're waiting for somebody to provide you, the art and things like that to it, you're kind of dependent on their schedule a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, you can't watch it. So you're like, okay, whenever.
Yeah. Yep. And then 40-hour-a-week jobs, when do you have time to actually go in and do these things?
Mm-hmm. And especially if nobody's getting paid.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Is there what kind of interests you about the horror genre?
I have loved horror since the time I was 5 years old. And my parents, I would say they are some of the most conservative people that you could possibly find on this earth. But for whatever reason, there were very little boundaries when it came to what I was allowed to watch, consume, things like that. And my grandma, I mean, I love this about her. She was just a horror addict. And I remember, walking into her house and she had that wall of VHS tapes. Before people even had large collections of movies like that, when the tapes were still, $40, $50, in the mid 80s, she was going out and buying them because she loved movies that much. And she skewed more towards kind of she grew up on the Universal monsters. She's of that generation. But then later it became things like Rosemary's Baby, The Omen, The Exorcist. She really liked the supernatural side of things. And then, her and I could connect on a lot of those movies. But when I started getting more into the gore, that left her behind. She liked werewolves and vampires and demons, things like that. Less. So that's... For me, there's a heavy bit of nostalgia to it. It takes me to a place of, happiness and, when I was younger. But also, it's one of those things like you're along for the ride with it. And it's a safe, outlet. You get to feel, the fear and things like that. And the creativity, even from a young age, just seeing like gore effects and things like that always just spoke to me. It just, felt like an art form I could connect with.
Yeah. I hear you, actually. That's a great answer. So what is your favorite part of the filmmaking process?
When it's done and you get to show it to people, I would honestly say is the best part. But I mean, honestly too, like coming up with an idea and then working collaboratively with people and seeing what they want to do with it. And, knowing that, no matter what the project looks like, there's a team that's doing it. And typically not, one person isn't doing everything themselves, maybe on some animation project. But if you've got voice actors, if you've got, somebody who's doing the editing, somebody who's, whatever part of it, you're part of a team at that point. So, that's pretty cool.
Good. And what films or filmmakers have inspired you over the years?
I would say from the time I was young, Halloween and John Carpenter. John Carpenter has always been my favorite, and as I've gotten older, even exploring movies that maybe I didn't see when I was, younger, now you have the ability with 4K discs and things like that to have an entire library of movies. And I'm one of those people that will always be physical. And, I've gone in and bought, all of the Escape from New York and, The Thing and like movies like that maybe you'd catch on HBO, but it was in, like bad quality. It's 4:3. And now you're actually seeing the framing of it and what he was actually trying to accomplish and just the beauty of the shots and things like that. And like somebody like, John Carpenter was at his best when he was working with like Dean Cundy and like having that scope and the way he, framed, films and things like that. So I would say that, Nightmare on Elm Street, a lot of Wes Craven's catalog is, very much right up there as well. Things that, stuck with me. Poltergeist was absolutely one of those movies that made me never want to be in my own bed. So many times. My parents were showing me that at like 4 years old, and I remember like crawling in bed with them because I thought something was going to come out of the closet or the clown was going to come from under the bed.
Oh yeah,
all of that type of stuff. So I would say I'm at my best with the 70s through, early 90s movies, but there's some good movies I like now as well from modern day.
Any examples?
I just saw the Terrifier 3. I really enjoy, I actually met Damien Leone a couple of times at conventions, things like that. And, what he has done and actually created what I would say is like a pretty iconic character that can stand up with a lot of the, the past greats. Like right now, you say, art, and people kind of know in horror circles what that means, like alongside like a Freddy or a Michael or a Jason. So, I can, and I love the actually using practical effects versus I think what lost me in, horror filmmaking over the last 15 or 20 years was I think of something like the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. And you have like the most effective shot that you can think of is Freddy coming through that, piece of like
Yeah.
spandex material and
Yeah.
seeing the shadow. And that was done for probably like $1.50, but they redo it in the remake and it's CGI and they
it's
probably
terrible.
spent millions of dollars on it and it doesn't look as good as what they did in
It doesn't look
1984.
good at all.
Yeah,
it's
it's so bad.
embarrassing.
But no, I hear you. And also, I mean, with the horror icons, like when was the last time before that we'd had an actual icon? Probably Ghostface, I'd say.
I would tend to agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
And Ghostface, I mean, can you even count him? Because it's a different.
I mean, it's a mask.
It's
I
a
can't count the
it's
mask.
a mask, yeah. But I mean, I guess Adam Green tried with Victor Crowley in the Hatchet movies, but that didn't really.
Yeah, and I get the
catch
Babadook
on.
kind of tried to catch on too, but
You can't call it that an horror icon with one movie, though.
No.
You know.
Yeah, I'd say you have to at least get to like a trilogy, 3 to 4 movies of one character and building that lore and things like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Art the Clown now is he is now he'd be considered
modern
horror
day.
royalty.
Yep.
Yeah, like him or not.
Exactly. And I mean, it's, that's the beauty of horror. There are so many movies out there and there's so many platforms now to consume it off of. You can go to something like Tubi and watch thousands of movies that you wouldn't have had access. Before it was walk down Blockbuster Videos aisles and maybe a case, jumped out at you. If you were lucky, your parents rented you 2 of them and that's what you had for the weekend. But if the first one was a dud, you're like, the second one better be good, right?
Yeah, like kids, sometimes they're like, the case, like, okay, I'm taking a chance on you.
I also used to have the not just the Blockbuster, but like those like Leonard Maltin like 5,000 movies kind of like, you ever seen those books? And then like they'll be alphabetical order all these movies and it'll give a brief description. For some reason, I used to love reading those books.
And in the 90s, I had this, it was like a horror encyclopedia, and you could almost just go through it, and it would just give short synopsis, of everything, every genre movie that they could come up with, and you were just like taking that to the video store and like, do they have this one? Do they have this one?
I know. I tried to go alphabetical order at Blockbuster back when I was younger, but it was a feat. I don't think I ever.
They kept on changing.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably never get out of A.
That is true.
So how did you then hear about Halloween-a-Palooza, and why did you decide to submit?
That was definitely something that popped up on my radar, and I think it's, I have attended different cons before, Kansas City or, like Planet Comic-Con or, different things like I've even been to like Star Wars celebrations, things like that. So like anytime there's a convention that's going to be, near, it seems my algorithm pulls it up. And I saw Halloween-a-Palooza last year, and it was just something that, time and when it was scheduled, just it wasn't going to work out. But I saw it again this year, and I went to Mike and I'm like, we should submit a couple of films to this and just see if they get accepted, because I would love to go attend that. I think that it's great because not every community has an event like this to bring people together in their love of horror and genre and all that stuff. It's just, so he sent it in and he's like, all right, he's like, this is all on you. He's like, let's see if we get accepted. And 2 of the 3 films we sent in got accepted, and I'm like, I'm going. And unfortunately, he can't be here because he should be absolutely the main voice speaking about, especially Chicken Wing Apocalypse. But him and I, it was a little more collaborative when we did Great Monsters Walk These Halls. But yeah.
Also, Mike here at Halloween-a-Palooza gave me some specific questions to ask you.
Okay.
He's actually been talking because he was there when we watched it at SNAF.
Yeah, because we just watched this at SNAF and loved it.
And we were
that's
asking
awesome.
people in their interviews what their favorite movies of the thing, and I think he even listed Chicken Wing Apocalypse as his favorite at SNAF.
Very cool.
So, well, you already answered that question.
Yes, definitely based on a dream.
So what made you decide to take this dream and turn it into a film? Was that mainly Mike, your friend Mike, pushing you?
I think it's friendship and trust and knowing that, him and I even though, like, as friends, sometimes we're kind of like an old married couple, and we've been friends long enough now to where we just bicker and fight about things. But we know, like, we're never really going to be mad at each other to the point where it's going to affect the friendship. But so I trust him, and I trust him to make something that will, do it justice and all that type of stuff. So when, he said he wanted to take it, and actually finally finish it, I was like, yeah, let's go for it. And
let's make the jump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do it as an animated film?
It's kind of a very stylized thing. And, as a dream, if you take it into reality, you're going to lose a dreamlike, feel to it. And it's going to become just, a short film at that point, which would be fine. Like you could make another version of it and do it in the real world like that. But it's not going to have that almost, surreal quality to it that, when you wake up from a dream that's really vivid, and it just sticks in your mind that way. And, and things sometimes in a dream like that are off. Colors are off and things like that. And it's just it's not the real world. And I think that's a reason to kind of go that route.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So any filmmakers out there that are just getting started or thinking about getting started, do you have any advice for them?
Find your group. And, I think in this day and age, especially, there's a lot more outlets for it in any, mid to larger size city. There's, more people doing more things. I think, equipment has made that possible, the affordability of it, the ease of use. You're not doing it the way you were, 25 years ago. When I was in school, when we were first editing, everything was kind of tape to tape and stuff like that. And
we did that.
Yeah, that was, 1999, I think, was the first year I took a class like that. And it was and like they were saying, well, next year we're getting this digital editing system. So, it's good that you might need to know this because you might work at a TV station that's still going to do this. I don't know any of my friends that really ended up doing it for a living or anything like that, but it all went digital. And then, just being able to plug a camera straight in and just feed that, in there, that's so much. It helps the creativity so much.
Yeah, it does. Awesome. Is there a way for people to either check out your work or get a hold of you and kind of see what you're up to?
So I would say, especially for that film in particular, Mike is still wanting to put it into a few more festivals. And there are a few that say that if there's like a YouTube, link to it or anything like that, that it may not be eligible. So that one, usually at about the 1.5 to maybe 2 year mark, then, he'll just put it on YouTube or something along those lines, but not as of yet. You can kind of check out a lot of his other films, and he's Shoot to Fill. On all the social media platforms, YouTube, he has his own page, and our other film, Great Monsters Walk These Halls, is out there. This is probably the last time that it's going to run, so it was nice to have that experience one more time with it.
Oh yeah, and you can't beat that theater experience with your movie.
No. Oh, absolutely.
Seeing it with an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. God. Well, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate
it.
Yeah, and I hope you have a great rest of Halloween-a-Palooza.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.